Hello and welcome to Name Your Brand Module 2. The first module was all about getting you excited about naming and understanding the different sorts of categories that are out there. Hopefully you found some interesting stories about your own favourite brands, and I'd love to hear what they were if you can share them with me. This module is all going to be about gaining some insight, which is a really important part of telling any story about a business and a brand. And it's going to be some tasks around gaining some research, basically. So we're going to explore our businesses in a little bit more of a broad context. We're then going to focus on the specific offer that we're giving to people. And then finally, there's going to be a small task around gaining some direction into what actually may be the right sort of territory for your name. So you get a little bit of direction around that. Enjoy the presentation, download the worksheets afterwards, rewatch the presentation as often as you like, and I'll see you on at the end or on module 3. Before I actually start to create a name, it's actually important to get some of the basics in place and gain some insight into your business so that we can use that to help inform the naming decisions that we make later on. I don't actually know what kind of business, product or service that you're going to use, but these principles are all appropriate. They're all the same principles that you would use in naming any of these things. And what we do know is that you are trying to create a brand name. For the purposes of the presentation, I'm actually going to use an example of a hammer brand. It's totally made up. If you happen to actually be creating the name for a hammer brand, you've lucked out a little bit, but I just want to show some of these principles around this fictitious hammer brand that we're going to talk through, just to bring this to life so that you know how to apply this to your own naming challenge. If you think about hammers, yes, there's a hammer. It's a very ordinary looking object, but actually there's a whole wide variety of hammers out there in the marketplace. I'm sure, you go into a store, you'll see hundreds and you won't necessarily know which to pick and choose and why. And it's the same for any product, business or service. You need to give people a reason to choose yours. And obviously the brand name is a significant part of that decision. So the way that we do this to begin with is to explore the actual subject matter. We go further, we go in depth into what actually the business is all about. I would hope that you've all got some sort of business plan, some sort of idea of what your vision for your business is and what it is that you're doing already. Otherwise, it is going to be very, very difficult to think of a name for something. The next part of what we'll do is look at the focus and actually find a way of actually drilling down into the very specifics about your own brand and what makes that unique. And then finally in this presentation, we'll be looking at giving you some direction so that you know roughly which sort of names are going to be working better for you in relation to the competition. So the exploration part is really important, gaining that sort of insight and understanding about the subject matter in general. So if we take hammer, I want you all to create a mind map for your own business, product or service. So, at the center of that, just write down what the product is, what the service is, and then start to think very sort of specifically about it. It could be the practical things, the physical things, but just think about, all the obvious stuff really, but go beyond just actually your product and service. Think about the different types, so to describe a hammer, what are the colors, what are the sounds, what is the material it's going to be made out. What are the practical stuff? What's it going to be used for? What different types of hammers are out there? There's clubs, there's claws, sledges, ball hammers, pin hammers. All these words and all this language will really help inform the decisions that we make later. Other things to think about, think a bit laterally. So you think about hammers, the history of hammers. 3.3 million years ago was the first hammer. Would that be useful for us in a naming term? Thor had a hammer. Is that going to be good for us as well? And all these things are really going to help us. And then finally, you can think a bit more emotionally about it. What are just the instant responses when someone says the word hammer? You hammer the message home, or people hurt their thumbs on hammers. All these things are really going to help inspire us when we come to names. So the first task is really to create a mind map and stick your product, business, service, however you describe it, into the center. Think about all the practical, all the literal things about that business and the other areas of the business that's not just relating to you, but also think creatively about it. Get everything down. I would always try and get this down onto one sheet of paper. Don't have to use the paper. You can use software if you like, but just get as much down as possible that helps you think about the whole of the market for your product or service. The next task is really now to find a bit of focus. So we've gone far out, we've sort of reached out and beyond ourselves. It's really now we need to sort of drill into what we as a business are doing. Now, when I'm doing branding for businesses, we tend to use a brand model, which is the framework, if you like, for creating the full brand story. We look at the vision, the position, the offer, the values, the mission, and at the center of it, the center of my brand donut, is this sticky jam which glues everything together. Now, these brand models can take quite a while to develop and deliver, but I'm hoping that you've done quite a lot of work on your business already, otherwise you wouldn't be thinking of coming up with a name for it. And things like the vision and the mission and the values are things that you really know and understand. They're all very important and they all help. But I think for the purposes of what we want to do with this name, I want to focus on just a couple of little elements that are really going to help us think very specifically about what our product, service and business is doing. So the why or the what or the who, and create a statement about that. And if you like, let's call it the wow wow statement. And to do that, what I'm just going to show you this in the basic principles about a hammer again. So first of all, think about your product or service. And why does it matter? Why is it so unique? Why should people bother with it? Is it because it's lightweight, it's got reliable grip, it glows in the dark? Get as much information as you can about the why. And then actually the more descriptive elements, what it actually is. It's got a head, it's got a handle, it's 20 centimeters, it's made of wood, it's a tool. All those very functional descriptive things should be noted down. Finally, identify who it's for. Think about the audience. Don't need to get too detailed into personas, but this is going to benefit builders, home DIY enthusiasts, decorators. Who is going to really benefit from this hammer that we're bringing to market? And then the final part of it is to actually then create a little statement, 4 or 5 words, that is the wow wow statement. It just says, why, what and who. So reliable grip handle for builders, lightweight head for DIY enthusiasts. Just really sort of boil all this down into a nutshell of these 4 or 5 words that really help describe our business, our product and our service. And that will really help us later on when we start to make decisions about what name is right for us. And it means we don't have to go back over all the detailed business plans. Obviously, like I've said, this is for a hammer, but say you had a yoga business, so it's more of a service-driven business that you're trying to name. It's the same principles. Explain why it matters. Well, it reduces stress, it improves balances. How are you going to deliver this? Describe it. Video tips, group coaching, and then who is it going to benefit? Busy mums, students, outpatients recovering, etc. And then you can sort of like jumble those up a little bit and create these wow statements. So happiness videos for mums, stretch coaching for students. Again, 3 or 4 of these will really help you to create a name that's going to be right for the business that you're bringing to market. So in the worksheet, again, explain why it matters, describe what it is, and identify who benefits. Write as much down as you can. Again, I tend to try and keep these to single sheets. Otherwise, you end up with reams and reams of paper that become really difficult to relate back to later on when we start the actual creative process. And as I said, try and create 3, maybe maximum 5, but a few of these statements, just different ones that could actually help influence and inform us later. The final part of this is to actually form some direction onto where the right name is going to be for our business. So if you think back to task 1, when I asked you to look at the different categories, we had literal, real, obscure. I would create a grid of the different naming categories. This is a positioning matrix that helps us really think how different business names relate to one another. So at the top of there, I've got a bunch of names that are going to be quite literal versus ones at the bottom which are going to be obscure. To the left, totally made up names, and to the right, real names. Positioning is all about putting things in relation to the competition. So for the sake of argument, with this example, I'm just going to choose some of the large technology brands that everyone is familiar with, and you can see how they may fit into those categories, into those segments. So in the top right, you've got something that's real and literal, Apple and Amazon. Whereas in the bottom right, something that's a bit more obscure, but still real words, Google and Kindle, fireside chats. Top left, things that are made up, but quite literal, Facebook, Netflix, they sound quite real, really. Whereas the bottom, we've got things that are actually made up and a little bit more obscure, Zapier and Plaxo. And understanding how these categories of names relate to one another is going to become really important for you as you start to develop your own names, because when you start to think about some of the benefits and some of the strengths or weaknesses of those names, you'll want to make decisions about how you want your name to develop. So if you think about these examples, top right, it's really hard to own. It's really hard to own names that are just single everyday words, because the marketplace has been saturated. Every URL has been owned, but also it takes a long time for something that is very generic to have meaningful a relationship with an audience. Whereas the bottom left, it can be very confusing to people to begin with. So it'll take a long time for those to become established. Whereas if you take the other quadrants, things like, you know, Facebook and Netflix, they're easier to create and they're probably easier to connect with audience. Maybe they're not as exciting though. And then things like Google and Kindle, again, they've really got that story embedded into them. And so they create really good names that are really going to help us actually engage with those audiences. So I just want you to think about the categories again, but in relation to your own businesses, to the own businesses that you're trying to bring to market. Task 3 is to identify 15 to 20 competitors and actually put them into a positioning grid. Use the matrix that I've suggested or come up with your own. But the idea is that once you've started to arrange these into the groups, you'll start to see whether you want to stand out or blend in. If all your competitors are using very sort of real compound names like Netflix and Facebook, you know, do you want to be different? Obviously that could make it harder for you, but it also might offer you some distinction. So create the axes, position the names of your competitors into the grid. Like I say, do a fair number, 15 to 20, but also ensure that you include some big brands, not just the direct competitors, some people that you really admire that are big influence on you, because that's who you aspire to be. And then have a think about what's going to be the right naming category for you. All the worksheets are in a book. Download those and you know, go through them. Take a little bit of time on this, because always gaining insight is going to help you later. But you know, if you do come up with names as you go along, you know, feel free, just keep writing them down. I would always forget things, so I'll keep them on post-it notes, whatever serves you best. You know, keep a list as you go along. Try not to get too distracted by exploring those names, because in the next section, we're going to look much more deeply in how to create a name and how to develop that in something that's going to connect with your audience. So I look forward to seeing you on module 3, how to create a name. So thank you for watching. I'd really recommend taking some time on this research, gaining that insight into your business, your brand, your audience and your competitors, because that's really going to help you as you start to develop a name at the next stage in module 3, creating a name. It's the fun bit, it's hard work, but all of this stuff that we've been doing as background will really help us get the right name for your business. And I look forward to seeing you on the next module.